first case was still causing me problems. The main one was that I was getting nowhere. I had found no evidence for my client that his wife might be having an affair, and he just informed me that if I didn't get some evidence in the next 2 days, he would no longer require my services. Well, I had no prospect of any other work, so I really needed to keep this case going. I was beginning to think that my client's wife may not be having an affair at all, and Bob Martin, who I had been trying so hard to track down, may well just be the name of a product designed to boost the well-being of dogs. I decided to do some serious thinking. I sat in my office and sipped a glass of single malt whisky. The night was hot and humid. There was drizzle in the balmy London night air, and neon flickered through cigarette smoke that spiralled up from a cigarette perched on the side of a full ashtray. I sipped another large whisky as I continued to contemplate my next move. It turned out my next move was to keep pouring and drinking whisky until, eventually, a realization came over me. I realized that I had slipped off my chair and was slumped under the desk. As I sat there covered in whisky and cigarette ash, I wondered, what was I doing? So I gave myself a good talking to, dragged myself up, dusted myself down, and walked into a hat stand. I knew getting drunk was not the answer, and I went out to get a cup of strong coffee. As I once again trod the wet London streets, I found myself mixed in with some of the low-life scum that lurked in London's corrupt and seedy underbelly. Walking beside me were pimps, muggers, murderers, rapists, swine flu carriers, necrophiliacs, and bankers. Soon I was sipping a cup of hot coffee in a coffee shop that was also the home of a late-night basket weaving club. I sat pondering my predicament. It seemed my client was only going to be happy and therefore pay me when I present him with proof that his wife's having an affair. Then suddenly, just as a fight broke out between two of the basket weavers, I had an idea. If he wants proof that his wife's having an affair, the only way I was going to get it was to have an affair with her myself. I knew that my client was going away on business for the weekend, so on Saturday morning I left home dressed in my best suit, smelling of fine aftershave, and set off to woo my client's wife. As I hopped off a bus and began to walk up the street where she lived, I noticed a tramp bent over coughing in the doorway. Being concerned for his well-being, I said to him, "You don't sound too good, mate. Why don't you see a doctor?" He turned to me, hardly able to talk because of the coughing, and he said, "Fuck off," and as he did, he threw up all over my freshly polished Italian designer shoes. Luckily, as I walked on, there were several puddles that I used to rinse the sick off my shoes. I eventually managed to get it all off, but somehow the shine seemed diminished. It was 11:30 a.m. when I spotted her going into the nail bar. A few seconds later, I followed her in and ordered myself a pint of nails. She was sat alone at a table by the window, not far from where I was casually sipping my pint of Nails Bitter. She was drinking a coffee and seemed to be searching for something in a rather large handbag. Her phone rang, and in her haste to answer it, she knocked over the bag, spilling its contents all over the floor. Seizing my opportunity to make contact with her, I rushed over and said, "Let me help you with that." As I did, I began to pick up her strewn belongings and place them back into her bag. "It's okay," she said, "I can manage." "Don't be silly," I replied. "It's my pleasure." Apart from the usual lipstick and mascara, there are a few more surprising items, such as a collection of 14 various dildos, about 100 condoms, handcuffs, 3 tubes of lubrication, personal, 4 pairs of knickers, a length of rope, a butt plug, a diary that listed hundreds of men's names and varying amounts of cash payments, a paperback book entitled The Happy Hooker, a couple of pairs of fishnet stockings, and about £1,000 in cash. While helping put all the stuff back into her bag, my natural detective instincts came to life, and I knew there must be something about her belongings that might give some insight into what kind of woman she is and what she might do for a living. But as hard as I tried, I could think of no link between all the items in her bag. So far, she was still quite a mystery. She thanked me for my assistance and we got chatting. My plan to woo her into bed, to get evidence I needed, was taking its first tentative steps. I began to buy her alcoholic drinks in the hope that it would loosen her tongue. After her 8th tequila sunrise, her tongue was so loose it was flapping around like a wet Jolly Roger in a hurricane. She revealed that she hated her husband, only stayed with him for the sake of the dog. Then she left me completely amazed. She confessed to being a high-class hooker, my favourite kind. At last, things were going my way. I quickly devised a plan. Here was an opportunity to make love to a beautiful high-class hooker, and all I needed to do was take a few incriminating photos, pass them on to her husband, and I would have successfully completed my first private detective case, and I will be handsomely rewarded when he pays my bill. I suggested to her that we could do a little business, and just 15 minutes later we were outside her lovely London home. We went in, and her large dog rushed up to greet her. It began to lick around her mouth and face excitedly, and she did the same back in return. A few seconds later the dog trembled and then walked to his basket and went to sleep. I noticed a small white stain on her dress, and I thought, she really is gifted. Just then she beckoned me towards the bedroom, and it looked like I was just about to find out how gifted she really was. Soon I was naked on the bed. She said she loved bondage and asked if she could tie me to the bed. Well, I'm not a man who's afraid to walk the kinky side of the kinky line, so I happily agreed. Once she'd had me tied down, she popped a Viagra into my mouth, saying it would help prolong the ecstasy. She left the room briefly, then returned wearing only stockings and suspenders, and she was carrying a spray cream and some fruit. She took hold of my rigid penis and sprayed some cream onto the end, then placed a cherry on the top. It looked like I was doing an impression of the Land's End lighthouse. As I lay there, throbbing with excitement, suddenly her husband and dog came into the room. She smiled at him and said, "Everything's ready, darling." With that, both of them and the dog joined me on the bed. It turned out this had been their plan all along, and I was merely a pawn of porn, to be used in their sordid sexual game. The days of pressure and struggle I'd endured were all just so they could use me like their plaything. During the following 6 hours, they used me in every disgusting, perverted, degrading and debauched way that they could dream up. I was subjected to things so sexually bizarre that I could never have imagined them, things so incredibly perverted that one or two of them I almost didn't enjoy. The next day I was back in my office. I was wondering what my first case had taught me. What lessons had I learned? One thing I'd learned was if a woman asks you to do her doggy, make sure she's not talking about her dog. What else? Well, I found out that being a private dick is not all it's cracked up to be. There's a lot more to it than hiding in the shadows behind a newspaper. Yep, it's not all glamour. It's hard, dirty, filthy, stinking work.